Greetings, dear listeners. So, on today's podcast, we're going to look at different case studies that were employed to prevent and recover from disasters in South Africa. So, we have two case studies: the floods that took place in 2010 in South Africa, and the fire and invasive species control program of eThekwini municipality. So, starting with the fire and invasive species control program of eThekwini municipality. So this program was initiated by the eThekwini municipality to restore degraded grassland ecosystems through the control of invasive alien plants and the application of control bans on important biodiversity sites. The program aimed to ensure optimal restoration of such biodiversity sites while at the same time delivering green jobs and skills development through employment and training of local people, especially those from the previously disadvantaged areas. To ensure the long-term persistence of this grassland ecosystem, proper veld management interventions were required, and this include carefully planned fire management strategy. The application of prescribed bans in grassland ensures that woody material is controlled, thus preventing a situation where grassland patches are completely taken over by woody plant species. This phenomenon is referred to as bush encroachment. Bush encroachment can lead to the disappearance of some grassland species, thus contributing to local extinction and a collapse in the ecosystem functioning. The program has been running since 2009. Currently, it is in its third phase with an intention of proceeding to the fourth phase. Each phase is for 3 financial years. The requirement of the program is based on the National Environmental Diversity Act of 2004, which requires control of invasive species for all landowners, including local government. The result of the long-term field condition assessment show that the condition of most grassland is improving, which means the program was a success because more than 70% of the site were in subclimate stage, a stage where maximum biodiversity thrives. Moreover, results from fixed point photograph indicate that bush encroachment has been reduced in most sites. In terms of the IAP presence, the majority of the site has moved from the initial phase to follow up and the follow-up and maintenance phase. This means that the level of invention on all the site has been reduced. This program was a success. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention what IAP are. IAP are invasive alien plants. Now let's look at the floods that took place in 2010 in South Africa. Between December 2010 and February 2011, widespread floods hit South Africa. The total damages were estimated at approximately $1.1 billion, with 103 fatalities occurring. The particular impacts included the following: flooding of water pumping infrastructure in the provinces of Free State, Northwest, and KwaZulu-Natal, waterborne diseases in the Northwest province, washing away of palm motors in the Free State province, blockage in the pumping of raw water for treatment into the water treatment works in the Free State province, and the possibility of the cholera outbreak in Limpopo province. Dams at the main river systems in the country were reported to be at 92 to 115% of their capacity. To deal with the floods and their impact, the National Minister of Water and Environmental Affairs released $488,000 from the Ministry Emergency Relief Fund to effectively manage dam levels, raise awareness, and to fund to relief operations. To address the humanitarian needs, the National Department of Social Development provided $43.2 million from the Social Relief of Distress Fund, the Emergency Relief Fund, and the National Treasury allocation. The flood assistance scheme was activated by the Department of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries, and $3.4 million was released for the damaged assessment and agricultural relief for farmers. Department of Public Works and Defense and Veteran Affairs built 12 low-cost bridges. The IDT program has allocated 31.2 million USD for building of mud schools and road repairs around the disaster affected areas. The national government disease outbreak monitoring by the Department of Health was used to monitor drinking and surface water quality, while 18.1 million USD spent on emergency housing by the National Department of Human Settlements. Therefore, the national government response was deemed adequate. However, research into understanding the risk of flooding is still limited and must be strengthened. Focus must be placed on investigating the risk and vulnerability during storm surges, coastal flooding, and the implication from acid mine drainage. Dissemination of the disaster-related information must be improved at the national level. Major problems still exist in disaster management at the local government level. In 2011, 50% of the local municipalities in South Africa lacked disaster management structures, while 68% of the local and 25% of districts municipalities did not have disaster management advisory forums. Disaster management roles were often assigned to existing civil defense structure in local municipalities. Thus, the fire and rescue services and police became overburdened, diminishing the efficiency of the flood response. At the same time, the stakeholder involvement was also not possibly due to the lack of advisory forum and volunteer units. Constitution of the mandatory disaster management structures must be made a priority by provincial and national government. Training of local officials by SALCA and other relevant institutions will have to be strengthened. Where this is not feasible for the disaster management and advisory forums and volunteer units should be established and made operational as a priority. Local municipalities have been asked to implement variety of early warning systems. So this just shows that South Africa is not well prepared for the disasters. So there's still a lot that needs to be done. So right now on this podcast we also have a guest who's going to share with us her opinion on this topic as well of disaster preparedness, response and recovery in South Africa.
Okay.
Greetings, Zama. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Sikan? Oh, it's Tulile. Sorry, it's Tulile.
I'm good. Okay, so the purpose of this podcast is to find more information about the state of preparedness in the country and your opinion as a professional town planner, if the country is ready to deal with disasters like floods and earthquakes, and what do you think should be done in this situation. And once again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, I guess we can start.
Yes.
Okay, with the first question. So, how does it feel to be working? Would you say this is what you always wanted to be? Did you always want it to be a town planner, and what challenges did you face?
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity and thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I feel very honored as a young Black African female town planner to be a blueprint for future young town planners and to people who want to pursue this career path. So, how does it feel working? I think working has been a very difficult journey. Because when you come out of varsity, you have an idea that you're gonna get your first job. You want to work in municipality. I unfortunately did not end up in municipality for my first job. I went straight to national. So things are done differently there, where municipalities rely on you to get development done. So I saw human settlement development and town planning from that perspective. And then I really, grew passionate about human settlement development in terms of township establishment, informal settlement upgrading, and town planning of that sort, development planning. So Currently I'm working at one of the metro municipalities in the country as a infrastructure skills development grant recipient. It's a grant from National Treasury. Um, I deal more with land use, spatial planning, site development planning, building controls, all of that in one. So I deal with land use applications, I deal with national projects, catalytic projects. So being a planner on that scale is also something completely different from where I started out in my town planning journey. So it's been interesting. Um, but yeah, I think that's just how my journey has been, and it turned out not to be what I wanted to be. And I'm glad it turned out this way because town planning is so vast. There's so
Yes.
many pockets and areas of planning which you never thought is applicable, but town planning is needed in each and every single thing you do. So, yeah,
So currently, are you happy, or it's just another phase of your life?
I am happy. I'm extremely happy. Um, I mean, I obtained professional planning at 26 years old. It's not something easy to do to obtain
Mhm.
professional planning so quickly out of varsity. I mean, I graduated in 2018, 19. There were times when I wasn't working, I was also affected by COVID.
Oh yeah.
Um, so more work from home. I was in private sector. Also, I was a consultant there. So, I've been through all of that. So, I mean, I would say I'm happy. I could be happier, but I'm definitely glad for the impact that I'm making currently that I've made and I'm going to make. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your response. So the second question is, over the past few decades, damage brought on by natural disasters has increased. The disaster management, infrastructure, and human settlements are all impacted by climate change in South Africa in different ways. And infrastructure is damaged because of the severity of the storm events and flooding, which may cause service delivery to be interrupted. So in this case, who do you think is to blame here? Do you blame the town planners, the municipality, or the government? Who do you think is to blame in this case?
Okay. The way when I saw this question, the way I thought about it, I thought about before any development takes place, especially human settlements. There's
Yes.
floodline determination. We need to know what is the 50-year floodline, what is the 100-year floodline, and if there is a possibility for people to be situated within these floodlines, studies need to be done. Environmental impact assessments, geotechnical studies to see that if we're actually going to keep these people here, what type of building materials do we need to use? So there are risks that people actually do build within flood lines. Then secondly, you find that people have located themselves in floodlines. They
Oh, yeah.
literally are there next to the river. I give you an
Yes.
example. Alex, Mamelodi, Centurion, an urban area is actually within a floodline. That's why they always have serious flooding issues. And people don't want to move, or they remove them and then they still go back.
They come back,
So
yes.
yes, that's another issue that we are facing. And then we also need to remember that there's also a lot of runoff because urban areas becoming more dense. There's a lot of townhouses, high density developments because everybody wants to be in the city, there are jobs there. There's less open spaces. So this creates runoff, and there's like the water is settling on top of tar. There's no sand to absorb it. So another thing as well, I'm just going to tie up all of these elements I'm mentioning. Stormwater catchment systems are not maintained. People damage stormwater. You throw a bottle in, those little holes you see in the side of the road. People, they use
Yes.
them as dustbins. So when there are floods, the water cannot drain through the drains because the drains are full of dirt because people use them as dustbins. So, I mean, I can't really say that all parties, it's one party. Everybody is to blame, you know, from professional sides. Professionals do not upgrade infrastructure based on the need. So they focus on one need. But in terms of development, um, creating human settlements is multi-layered. So you need to have the township, which is established, you have the rights, and then you need bulk infrastructure, you need transportation. So all of these things work together. And if all of these things are not aligned, we have issues where we are not able to enforce natural disasters um, properly and strongly so. So, because we don't know climate trends and the climate trends are not necessarily monitored. So, if we know that flood seasons is from June to August, for example, we're always going to see in the news, I'm sure you've been seeing currently that it's been flooding.
Yes,
Centurion,
especially
in
I
Cape
saw something
Town.
in Cape Town.
Yes. So because they know that it's flood season, it's windy season, it's winter season. So these things should have been mitigated already by
Yes, I agree.
seeing the trends which happened last year, so it doesn't happen again. So I think it's just negligence from government side and professional side. And in terms of people, we're not educated. There's a reason why people are moved from the floodlines because when it floods so badly because they're in the pan, but they see it has dried out, so they go there. And then when flood comes, right in the water, and people put brick and mortar structures there. So people are also to blame for stubbornness. I think the correct word is to use is people are stubborn, you know. The latter as well in stormwater catchments. If stormwater catchments were not unmaintained and not full of dirt, um, you know, disaster management would be easier and people wouldn't get so flooded so quickly. Places wouldn't be so flooded. So I think I've managed to, you know, answer that. There's two parties who play to this.
Yeah, yes, you did. You did. Thank you so much. So what you're saying is everyone is to blame.
Essentially, everyone is to
And that
blame.
is true. Yeah.
Everyone is to blame, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. As a planner, what can you say is missing in the way government responds to floods?
Yeah. Um, I would say it's the security. So let's say, for example, now there are floods happening in Cape Town, and then the disaster management department is on it. They have temporary housing or tents where they can go after they've been flooded with their belongings. And then at some point, they're supposed to be allocated temporary houses because their houses are gone. Um, those people probably will be in those temporary houses for like a year still after because they still then after that they're gonna be put on the beneficiary list for maybe subsidized housing or BNGs, RDPs. So people stay in those temporary houses, and then wherever there is a flood, they keep on making temporary houses. They don't formalize the places quickly enough, so it causes a backlog in um,
Oh, yeah.
mitigating the issues related to floods because maybe those people will still be in temporary houses, but it's close to where they used to stay, you see. So I think it really is about government needs to really work on the service delivery. I really believe that it can be better. However, if you go to most municipalities, town planners are actually, they don't have many town planners. You'll find maybe one person is doing everything. They're the building controller, they're the town planner, the
Oh,
development man, the project manager. They wear a lot of hats. They're not focused on one thing.
yeah.
Hence, certain um things which could be fixed through planning. Basic planning would have been avoided in terms of floods. So yeah, I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm just saying that, you know, we all
Okay,
have a role
okay.
to play. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that you have answered the second last question. Like, what can be done to better the response to floods? I
Mm.
think in some way in your response you have kind of touched on this question. So maybe you can elaborate more on what can be done to better the response to floods.
I think monitoring of flood-prone areas should be done regularly. It should be like the weather service. Weather is monitored. You're able to forecast for the next 2 weeks. So similar to flood-prone areas, like places where you know that when it rains heavily, these places are underground, everything is swept away, it becomes a nightmare. So they should um plan better for those places, you know,
Okay.
upgrade the infrastructure and strengthen the infrastructure. If they need to put more stormwater there, put in more stormwater outlets. If they need to not have any people staying there, let it be like that, close the bridges, for example, or lift the bridges up, or yeah, there's a lot of things they can do. Close off the wetlands, you know. So I think that's what can be done better to respond to floods by planning and monitoring and upgrading. Because I think that's where we lack sometimes in service delivery.
Yes, yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so the last question is, as a young professional planner who's working, do you ever feel that what we taught at schools about environmental planning and ethics is not the same as what we practice in the workplace? And do you think this is to blame for what is happening, the floods, the disasters, and the way that we respond? Like,
Mhm. What I can say for sure, what I've learned that theory is not the same as practical. You can understand the theory of it, but when it comes to applying that theory, it becomes different because that theory you need to personalize it to a certain situation.
yes,
So, I mean, for example, we do get taught a lot about, NEMA and Act 70 of 70,
yes,
um, but the actual application of it, like how do you assess it? Where is it applicable? When would I need to get authorization in terms of NEMA? What is a record of decision? How do I analyze it? We don't get that experience in school. We are taught about the policies being there, but the actual application, it's not the same. And assessing these things on site-specific circumstances, it's there in the LSDF, for example. The spatial directives say that we want this place to be a school, but the situation around it needs it to be a community center rather. You we don't learn those things in school. I don't know if like how your curriculum went, but I went to University of Pretoria. Um, I did my bachelor in town and regional planning with my honors there. So there was a land use module which did speak to land use, what is FAR, FSI,
yes,
assessing building plans, understanding what urban planning is, interactive streets, activity corridors, all of that town planning language. But you'd think that that is more applicable on a municipal level more. But when you deal with like actual land use applications, it's not like activity corridor level or all of that. It's more on that type of typology of words is more applicable to spatial planning and precinct planning. So you're not taught these things in varsity, So it's different. Um but you need to have that foundation of understanding at the same time. The theory is also important so that as much as practice is saying this, what is the theory around it so that you're able to make informed ethical decisions as a town planner, because you not being able to understand a simple document like a NEMA, for example, you can make a recommendation which has serious impacts. For example, can that recommendation could put somebody's house building lines within a servitude, and then what's going to happen after that, you know? So we need to be stricter in terms of understanding theory and practical and merging them together. Then the second part of your question was, do you blame damage that climate change continues to do in our cities? I can't.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Continue,
No.
please continue.
Do you want to elaborate on that question?
It was a build-up question on this one, that do you blame the damage that climate continues to do in our cities? Do you blame it on the schools of town planning, that what we're taught, it's not what we practice?
I think climate change is impacted by various factors.
Yeah.
Population growth adds to climate change, urbanization adds to climate change, greenhouse gases. Those change because it becomes so hot, there's smoke in the air. That's why winters are becoming colder and hotter. Colder, and then summers are becoming hotter because these are the circumstances which are happening. So I can't really say that I blame climate change, because it's something we all contribute to.
Okay.
Our consuming of, let's say, electricity, for example, hence the load shedding, electricity crisis we're facing, the way our electricity is produced emits greenhouse gases, which also contribute to climate change. So we are all, in essence, contributors to climate change issues. So I can't really say that we should, it's a blamer, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah.
It makes sense.
But definitely as planners, we can do better to prevent the damage. I
Yes.
think I have, as I've answered your questions, I've also put theories and possible strategies which could mitigate the impacts of floods in in the country.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, for
Okay.
responding to the questions. That was very informative and very helpful.
We have reached the end of this podcast, and a lesson that can be identified from different case studies is that effective disaster risk reduction education contributes to reduce risk and losses, and is most effective when it's not done in isolation but concurs with other policies. And the integration of activities relating to education, training, and awareness raising into relevant ongoing processes and practice is important for the long-term success of disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management activity. So that is it for this podcast, and thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the session.